Welcome to Influence Church Bible Study. This is our sixth installment in our Wisdom series. I know you've been learning a lot so far. Hey, the book of Proverbs has been really insightful, and we have grasped so many concepts, practical concepts from the book of Proverbs and from the wisdom of King Solomon. Today, I have some awesome news, right? Because we are going to be completing our wisdom study today. We're going to be completing the book of Proverbs. And I know what you're thinking, right? How is that even possible? Because we were only in chapter 6 last week. Are we going to be reading through the entire book of Proverbs today? Is this going to be a 5-hour long session? Because we have 31 chapters in Proverbs. How are we going to do this? Right? But what we're going to do is we're going to actually skip to chapter 31, the last chapter of the book of Proverbs. And the reason for that is from chapter 7 till chapter 30, I believe is very self-explanatory. I know as you've read it, you were able to grasp those concepts easily because King Solomon speaks a lot about the value of wisdom, and he expands a lot about why we need wisdom and how we can implement wisdom in our life. And most of it is straightforward. So we're going to skip through those chapters because I know as you read it, the Holy Spirit gave you insight and revealed it to you. So we're going into chapter 31. And today is also International Women's Day. So we want to shout out all our women on our stream looking on. And today, if you're looking at a later time, if you're viewing this content at a later time, today is Monday, March the 8th, 2021, International Women's Day. And it's no better day than for us to talk about this big topic, this controversial topic that has been debated, that has caused division in different sects of Christianity. And that topic that we're going to be studying today is, drum roll, that was a terrible drum roll. Should women be pastors? Should women be pastors? Hey, we're going to answer this topic. Men, don't turn off. You need to know this the answer to this question. Women, take special notes. You're going to be able to explain this thoroughly to the men that aren't listening in this live stream tonight. Why not click the subscribe button if you haven't as yet? It's either on this side or it's on this side. And make sure and click that share button and send this to people that you care about so they can be edified, inspired, uplifted, encouraged by God's word tonight. So let's get into our study. Are you ready? Yes, you are. Great. Let's go to Proverbs chapter 31. And the book of Proverbs is right after the book of Psalms. And as we would have mentioned in all our studies, majority of the book of Proverbs is written by King Solomon. However, chapter 30 and chapter 31 is not written by King Solomon. Proverbs chapter 30 is written by Agur, son of Jakeh. And Proverbs chapter 31 that we're going to be studying from tonight is written by Lemuel, king of Massa. So a king, the king of Massa, his name is Lemuel. He wrote Proverbs chapter 31. And Proverbs chapter 31 is commonly known as the virtuous woman or the Proverbs woman, right? A lot of you know about Proverbs chapter 31. We're going to start there and examine what Proverbs chapter 31 has to say about the characteristics of this virtuous woman. And then from there, we're going to go through scriptures, see what the Bible has to say. Should women be pastors? Is that a no? Is that a yes? What does the Bible say about this? And then at the end, I'm going to give my perspective and we're going to come to a conclusion on this topic for tonight. So you're there, Proverbs chapter 31. Let me pull up my presentation for tonight. Proverbs chapter 31. Should women be pastors? Proverbs chapter 31. Let's read together. And we're going to go through verses 10 to verses 31 tonight. And then we're going to examine a little bit more. What I'm going to do as we go through these verses are we're going to pull out qualities of this virtuous woman, right? This Proverbs 31 woman. We're going to pull out qualities. So as you read together with me, pull out these characteristics, these qualities that you see. You might see something that I missed because at the end of it, I'm going to show you a table with all the qualities that I found in Proverbs chapter 31 about a Proverbs woman, a virtuous woman. So pull them out with me as we go along. Let's go. Verse 10. Who can find a virtuous wife? For her worth is far above rubies. So she's worthy. The heart of her husband safely trusts her, so he will have no lack of gain. She does him good and not evil. She's a good woman all the days of her life. She seeks wool and flask and willingly works her hands. So she's willing to put her hands to work. She might be better than some men out there. Verse 14. She is like the merchant ships. She brings her food from afar. She also rises while it is yet night and provides food for her household. She provides. and a portion for her maidservants. Verse 16. She considers a field and buys it from her profits. She plants a vineyard. So she considers a field. So we see here that she is into that aspect of entrepreneurship. She's able to manage her money, and she sees something, she buys it, she plants in it, and then from her profits, right, she turns over her profit and then she plants a vineyard, right? That shows a lot of entrepreneurship, startup, able to create a business owner. Wow, that's a lot there. Verse 17, she girds herself with strength. She's strong, right? And her strengthens her arms. So physically, she's strong as well. 18, she perceives that her merchandise is good and her lamps does not go out by night. So she's perceptive. Her lamps doesn't go out by night means that she is proactive. She ensures that there's oil in the lamp, that it doesn't run out. Verse 19, she stretches out her hand to this staff and her hand holds the spindle. She extends her hand to the poor, so she's charitable. She has a heart of charity. God loves a cheerful giver. Yes, she reaches out her hand to the needy. Verse 21, she's not afraid of snow for her household, for all her household is clothed with scarlet. So she provides clothing for her household. They are warm during the winter. Verse 22, she makes tapestry for herself. Her clothing is fine linen and purple. So she's even a designer, right? She's able to design clothing. Her husband is known in the gates, so she's doing marketing. When her husband goes out, he's well known because of the cool clothes or the stylish clothes that he's wearing that his wife has made him. And let's see the hands of all the husbands who need their wives to dress them so they could look good, right? Verse 23, her husband is known in the gates when he sits among the elders of the land. Verse 24, she makes linen garment and sells them. So after her husband does all the advertising by modeling her clothes, she makes linen garments, she sells them and supplies sashes for the merchants. So a businesswoman. Verse 25, strength and honor are her clothing. She shall rejoice in time to come. She opens her mouth with wisdom, so she's wise, and her tongue is the law of kindness. So she's wise, but while she's wise, she's still kind. She watches over the ways of her household. She protects her household, and she does not eat the bread of idleness. She's not a gossiper. She doesn't waste time. She doesn't procrastinate. She's not a sluggard. We spoke on the ant versus sluggard in our last series, our last session. Verse 28, her children rise up and call her blessed, her husband also, and he praises her. Many daughters have done well, but you excel them all. Charm is deceitful and beauty is passing. Men, you hear that? But a woman who fears the Lord, so she fears the Lord, she shall be praised. Give her the fruit of her hands, and let her own works praise her in the gates. These are the qualities of a Proverbs woman, but not just a Proverbs woman, because I started off by saying the writer, the author of Proverbs chapter 31 was King Lemuel. So this is not just a Proverbs woman or a virtuous woman that he is speaking about, but in context, he's speaking about his wife, which means he's speaking about the queen. These are the qualities of a queen. Now, we can pull these qualities and say, well, in every relationship, your wife, she is your queen, all right? And I know men, there's this thing with king and queen, but I don't really fancy those jargons too much. But definitely your wife, she is a queen. So the qualities of a queen, I've just pulled out some from what we just read, and we will see that she's priceless, she's trustworthy, she works with her hands, she provides food, she's an investor, right? All these things we saw in Proverbs chapter 31, verse 10 to 31 as we were reading through. She's an entrepreneur. She's physically strong. She's intuitive. She's perceptive. She's proactive. She's charitable. She clothes her family. She's a designer. She's into marketing. She's able to trade. She's honorable. She's wise. She's kind. She's protective. And most importantly, she fears the Lord. So we see these qualities here, the qualities of a queen. From these qualities, it's clear to see that ability is not the question when answering, should a woman be a pastor? Should a woman be a pastor because a woman lacks the ability? No, that can never be the answer. Because based on these qualities, I see qualities here that most men can't really say they have. Like if we're saying all these qualities, some men might just have 5, 6. We might have a little 3, a little 2, some of we might have a little 10. But look at all these qualities of this queen, of this woman. right? So ability is not the question when it comes to should a woman be a pastor. Yes, a woman has the abilities that she can be a pastor. She's not any less in qualifications when it comes to abilities and what she can do than when it comes to comparing next to a male counterpart. So ability is not the question here. So should a woman really be a pastor? And I want to take us to one of the passages that would be used most of the times when it comes to saying a woman should not be a pastor. And let's go to 1 Timothy chapter 2, verses 11 to 14. This is a primary passage that is used to say that women should not be pastors, and this is a scriptural reference to it. So we know Paul writes the book of Timothy to Timothy, who is considered his son, his spiritual son, Timothy being a pastor of a church. And look at what Paul says. He says, let a woman learn in silence with all submission. Women, don't get angry. Hold on. And I do not permit a woman to teach or to have authority over a man, but to be in silence. For Adam was formed first, then Eve, and Adam was not deceived, but the woman, being deceived, fell into transgression. So Paul has given clear instruction to the church that Timothy is leading, and he's saying to this church that a woman should learn in silence. She should be submissive. She should not be permitted to teach or to have authority over a man, but to be silent. To be in silence. For Adam was formed first, then Eve, and then Adam was not deceived, but the woman, being deceived, fell into transgression. That's quite interesting, all right? So clearly here, we see Paul saying that a woman should not teach, a woman should not teach, a woman should not have authority over a man. Does this mean now that a woman should not be a pastor? More specifically, a woman should not be the lead pastor of a church, because being the lead pastor means that there's at that place where they have authority over everyone underneath them, which would be men included. So should a woman not be that leader of a church? Let's continue on, because this would be the main passage that draws most attention when it comes to women should not be pastors. Let's continue on into chapter 3 of 1 Timothy, because it gives more information on the qualifications to being a bishop, an overseer, an elder, and these leadership roles in the church. It says, this is a faithful saying. If a man desires, now this is where people who say a woman should not be a pastor, this is where they would say, well, look at these words, at how they are phrased towards the male gender, right? It says, this is a faithful saying, if a man, it doesn't say if a man or a woman, right? It says, if a man desires the position of a bishop, he desires a good work. And it uses the male pronoun throughout. He desires a good work. A bishop then must be blameless. And it says he must be the husband of one wife. Temperate, sober-minded, of good behavior, hospitable, able to teach, not given to wine, not violent, not greedy for money, but gentle, not quarrelsome, not covetous. These are high standards. However, these standards are specifically saying they are for a man in these verses. Let's continue in verse 4. It says, one who rules his own house well, having his children in submission and in all reverence. For if a man doesn't know how to rule his house, how will he take care of the church of God? Verse 6. Not a novice, lest being puffed up with pride, he fall into the same condemnation as the devil. Moreover, he must have a good testimony among those who are outside, lest he fall into reproach and the snare of the devil. Likewise, so we just read through bishop, deacon, basically the leader of a church, the head of a church, a pastor. Verse 8, likewise a deacon, this is a leader under the pastor, must be reverent, not double-tongued, not given to much wine, not greedy for money, holding the mystery of the faith with pure conscience. But let these also be first tested. Let them serve as deacons and be found blameless. Likewise, their wives must be reverent. So again, we see they're referring to men being deacons, right? Because their wives must be reverent, not slanderous, temperate, faithful in all things. Let deacons be husbands of one wife, ruling their children and their houses well. For those who have served well as deacons obtain themselves a good standing and great boldness in the faith, which is in Christ Jesus. So clearly here, we see that Paul is speaking about males, primarily males being leaders in the church. He doesn't mention female. The preface to this verse, these verses, which is chapter 2, speaks about specifically a woman being silent and should not have authority. Where does this lead us? Does this mean that women should not be pastors? Because Paul only speaks to men being deacons and bishops of the church. And then he says that women shouldn't be teachers. So what does this really mean? And as we continue to answer this question, I want us to look at biblical examples throughout the Bible. Because I would have mentioned before in studies that whenever answering a biblical question, the answer must have congruency. It must be a principle that we can see throughout the Bible. So even though in this one extract of scripture, we see that it says, no, a woman should not be a pastor, should not be in leadership. Is this true throughout the entire Bible, from Old Testament into New Testament? Is this the case? Because there must be congruency if we're going to establish this as a principle that we're going to stand by. We can't say just this verse. Why we can't say just this verse? Because maybe there was an underlying issue that Paul was trying to address with Timothy that they were having in the church, as well as we have cultural issues. Maybe it was that in the city that Timothy was leading this church, it was a major cultural issue for women to be in any form of leadership. We know up until our recent history, and this is why we are celebrating International Women's Day, women just weren't allowed to have a voice. They weren't allowed into any role of leadership. They weren't allowed to be CEOs, business managers, none of this. They were just prohibited from doing it because of the male society, male-dominated society that we had for many of centuries. So is this a biblical principle that is throughout the Bible, or is this something that Paul is trying to guide Timothy for their culture, for their time specifically, and it does not apply right now? Is this the question? So let's go through from some biblical examples from in the Old Testament into the New Testament. So I want to go through some women that were leaders in the Bible. And the first example is Deborah, and she was a judge and she was also a prophet. And you can find that reference in Judges chapter 4, verse 8 to 9. So definitely a leadership role was given to a woman biblically. Old Testament, Deborah, judge, prophet. That is a high office, right? The office of a prophet, for me, I consider the office of a prophet to be higher than the office of a pastor. Reason being is that the office of a prophet, especially in terms of the Old Testament, was someone who stood as leader over a nation. They spoke the voice of God to the people, and the prophets were established before kings. Before kings ever existed, prophets were the ones that led. Moses was the first prophet that led, right, the nation of Israel. And then we had a shift where they moved over to kings. But yet in the part of kings, prophets were the one that chose the king, and prophets, well, based on the word of God, they chose the king, anointed the king, and they were the one that would constantly give the king advice from God and tell the king what God wanted to be done for the nation. So to be a prophet and a judge is extremely high role, right? Don't confuse it to our modern day prophets, right? Modern day prophets is a different thing. I'm not going to get into that debate tonight, right? But this is an extremely high role. And we see biblically, Old Testament, yeah, we have a woman as a leader, a woman as a prophet, right, holding this office. Let's go on. We have Miriam. She was a worship leader, and in the book of Micah chapter 6 verse 4, she was listed together with Moses and Aaron as being leaders of the nation of Israel when they delivered them out of Egypt. Then we have Huldah, which is a prophetess and one of the restoration leaders in 2 Kings chapter 22. So she aided in the restoration of the law of God. Then we have Esther. There's an entire book in the Old Testament devoted towards the story of Esther. She was queen, she was a fearless leader, and she saved her people from annihilation. Interesting. Let's go to the New Testament. In the New Testament, we have Lydia. And Lydia was a merchant, and she was trading, selling, buying and selling. But she was also a small group leader, because in Acts chapter 16 verse 40, Paul returns to the home of Lydia, where she is having a home meeting with other believers, and they are sharing from God's word. So clearly, biblically, from Old Testament into the New Testament, women are leaders, right? The question now still is, okay, they are leaders, but should they be the leader? Should they be the pastor of the church? Should they be the one that has authority? Because we just read that a woman should not have authority over a man, right? So, okay, fine. Maybe in chapter 3 of 1 Timothy, where it says that, but it speaks from a male perspective, a man should desire the office of a bishop. Maybe that is just in context to that specific writing that Paul writes to Timothy. However, in chapter 2, it says a woman should not have authority over a man. So how is she going to be the pastor, the lead pastor of a church, if she does not have authority over a man? And I want to ask us the the common phrase that we had for a period of time as a band around our hands. What would Jesus do? What was Jesus's perspective on a woman leading the church? What was his perspective? And as we look at Jesus' perspective, we're going to see something very, very insightful, all right? Because Jesus was ready to change the culture of that time. Remember, in Jesus' time, women did not have a voice. They were excluded from studying the word, the Torah in the synagogue. They were not allowed to train and to learn and to teach, right? And they were not allowed to be messengers. They were not allowed to do so many things in that society. But look what Jesus does, right? And I'm going to pull from Jesus through 3 women. The first one is the Samaritan woman, or the woman at the well. Jesus has to take the gospel, the message of him being the Messiah, to an entire group of people known as the Samaritans. Not just was this a group of people, but this was a group of people that faced racial stigmatization. Stigmatization is the right word? Racial stigma, right? And they were outcast by the Jews. The Jews had nothing to do with the Samaritans. Even though passing through Samaria was a shorter route to getting to Jerusalem, they would pass around Samaria just because they had this disdain for the Samaritans, because they were considered mixed. So they were Jews that had relations with Gentiles, and they were mixed in that sense, right? And because of that, the Jews had nothing to do with them. But Jesus decides he's going to take this message to the Samaritan people, and he goes to Samaria. But instead of going to a man, instead of going to the head of the Samaritan council in Samaria, he goes to a well in the middle of the day, and he meets a Samaritan woman at the well. And you would find this in John chapter 4, where Jesus encounters a Samaritan woman, and her entire life is transformed by this encounter with Jesus. So much so that she becomes the first evangelist to the Samaritan people. She then goes running through the city, saying to the people, "Come and see a man that has shown me all things." And because of her testimony, the people of Samaria comes to Jesus, and they believe in Jesus. What does that mean? That means that Jesus was willing to shift the cultural norm. Jesus was willing to say to the Samaritan woman, "You carry this message forward." He was willing to trust her with the message of the gospel. Something so important. And she led her entire city into that place where they believed in Jesus. After her testimony, many converted in Samaria to following Jesus Christ as the Messiah, as God's Son. So definitely we see here that, okay, God, especially Jesus definitely wanted for women to have a leadership role. If he didn't want woman to have a leadership role, then he would have gone himself into the city of Samaria and start telling them about who he was. But he chose a woman. He could have chosen anyone, but he chose a woman. He could have chosen anyone, but he chose a woman. That says something. That says something. The other thing that I want to show you is Mary and Martha, all right? Because we know of the story of Mary and Martha. The most famous passage about Mary and Martha is where Jesus comes to the home of Mary and Martha in Bethany, and Mary sits at the feet of Jesus while he teaches, and Martha goes about cooking and cleaning and preparing a meal for Jesus. Now, culturally, Martha was doing the acceptable thing, because her place, quote unquote place in that culture, was to be a provider of the home, right? To take care of the home and to provide a meal for their guest that comes. And Mary was doing the wrong thing culturally, because Mary culturally was actually supposed to be doing the same thing Martha was doing. Women were not allowed to sit at the feet of a rabbi and learn from a rabbi. She was not prohibited to do this. So what she was doing was completely wrong, but yet she did it. And then Martha comes and complains to Jesus and said, why doesn't Mary come and help me as well. Tell her to do it, because Martha was right. By her cultural standards, Martha was right. Mary should be helping her. That was her rightful place when it comes to the role of a woman in that society. But watch what Jesus does. Jesus says to her, no, what Mary is doing, Martha, is the one thing that is needed. She is sitting at my feet and she's learning my teachings. So clearly, Jesus is shifting the culture again. He's saying, yes, it's okay. I want women to learn. I want them to learn about me. I want them to learn about God. And then the final one, that is really the nail on the coffin. And I use that term, nail on the coffin, because we're actually going to speak about the woman at the tomb, right? Nail, okay, that's a terrible joke. Woman at the tomb. Because at the tomb, there were three, sometimes we see four women that were the first to see the resurrected Jesus. We have Mary Magdalene, we have Mary of Joseph, which is the mother of Jesus, and we have Salome, which is the mother of James and John. And these women were the first to see the resurrected Jesus, because they went early at morning to the tomb, and when they arrived there, the angel said, "Who do you look for? He's not here. He's not dead. He's risen." And Jesus appeared to them in that moment, and they saw the resurrected Jesus. And the entire message of the resurrection was given into the hands of the woman. The woman ran back quickly, and when they told the men, first thing the man says, "You guys had to be dreaming. You always imagining that. That's not real," right? They didn't believe them. They disregarded their testimony. And in that culture as well, men would disregard the testimony of a woman. So then why would Jesus give this information of his resurrection to women? Because when you look at it, the entire gospel hinges on the resurrection. If the resurrection isn't true, then Jesus is a liar. If the resurrection isn't true, then Jesus is dead. When atheists are debating about Jesus being the Son of God, the main thing, or the main argument, is to try to disprove the resurrection of Jesus. Because if you can disprove the resurrection, then for sure the entire gospel falls apart. Because Jesus said he would give up his life willingly for us. He laid down his life, and 3 days later he was resurrected from the grave. And because of his resurrection, we could have eternal life. So he gives this message, this important message to women. Why? Because he wanted to change the culture. He wanted women to be the voice that carried forward this gospel. So Jesus, we have 3 examples: the Samaritan woman, Mary and Martha, and the woman at the tomb. Jesus was willing to hand over the gospel, this message of Jesus Christ, this message of himself, into the hands of the woman, to be the messengers, to be the voice that carried his gospel forward. And together with the early apostles, that's what they did. So then why is it still a debatable question if women should be pastors? You probably come saying again, well, okay, they are messengers. Fine, yeah, women could be evangelists, okay, but they shouldn't be lead pastors, right? I think differently, because Jesus was trusting them with this message that was so crucial. So if Jesus did this, then the question is Paul saying something contrary to what Jesus said? Because Paul is the one that writes in 1 Timothy and says that women should keep silent, they should not have authority over men. So what would Paul have done? And the thing is that we have more New Testament examples of women that were active in ministry through Paul being their apostle or their overseer. And let me show you it, right? And I have WWPD, which means what will Paul do, right? We just did what would Jesus do, what will Paul do, right? And Paul, there are 2 examples. We have Phoebe, who in Romans chapter 16 and verse 1 is a deacon that Paul sends to the Romans church to edify them and teach them on the word of God. And then we have Priscilla, who was a teacher in Acts chapter 18 verse 26, together with her husband. So we have deacon and teacher, and Paul was the one that was sending them out. So then how is it that Paul could have said in 1 Timothy that a woman should keep silent and she should not be a teacher, she should not have authority over a man? And then, well, if we want to use the example of how in Timothy chapter 3 it says that, well, a woman should be the one to desire the role, a man should be the one to desire the position of a bishop. We see that here, if a man desires the position of a woman, bishop, what am I saying? If a man desires the position of a bishop, he desires a good work. And people use that to argue and say, well, okay, a man should be the one who should be a bishop. But look at it. Paul says this is a faithful saying. If a man desires the position of a bishop, he does not say this is a faithful saying. A man alone should desire the position of a bishop. Or he doesn't say this is the law of God. A man should desire the position of a bishop. He's saying if a man desires the position of a bishop, it is a good thing. And if he does, these are the qualifications that he should have. And then he goes over to deacon as well. But wait, we just saw that Phoebe was a deacon under Paul. So therefore, when in Timothy chapter 3, it speaks about men, quote unquote, using men and the pronoun he of being a deacon, Paul is speaking specifically to Timothy and giving him advice, but he's not speaking about gender. He's not saying that men alone should desire this position, because then he has a woman, Phoebe, being sent out as a deacon. So definitely a woman could be a deacon, and a woman can be, we can go one step further to say a woman could be an overseer or a bishop, right? But the final, I know what you're asking, what about 1 Timothy chapter 3, right? Because, sorry, chapter 2, where it says that a woman should learn in silence with all submission and do not permit a woman to teach or to have authority over a man. Because this comes before chapter 3. And this is where the main debate lies, right? Should a woman be a pastor? We saw all this information that we've covered so far. We saw biblical examples, Old Testament, New Testaments of women leading in the Bible, women leading in the New Testament in terms of carrying the gospel forward. But here in 1 Timothy, it says, let a woman learn in silence with all submission. And do not permit a woman to teach or to have authority over a man. Now, I want you to pay close attention at verse 12. It says, do not permit a woman to teach or to have authority over a man. A deacon is a teacher. And we see as well, we see Phoebe and we see Priscilla as were teachers under Paul. So how is it that Paul could be saying, is he contradicting himself? How could he say now, do not permit a woman to teach or to have authority over a man? Maybe it was for the audience he was writing. Or maybe as well, this word or here is very crucial. Because he's saying, do not permit a woman to teach or to have authority over a man. And maybe he's speaking about the same thing here. Maybe he's speaking about really having authority over a man. Having authority over a man. And because teaching is, in a sense, having authority over a man. So I would say, in these couple of verses here, he is speaking more about women having authority over men. Let a woman learn in silence with all submission, and do not permit her to teach or have authority over a man. It's really about authority. I think that's what it really comes down to, authority over a man. A woman should not have authority over a man, right? So, I know what you're asking, right? If a woman cannot have authority over a man, then how is she going to be a lead pastor? Because she must have the authority to be a lead pastor. How are we going to really answer this question? Should women be pastors, more specifically lead pastors? Should women be pastors? Now, this is a very debated topic, and I started off by saying that. And we would see even in the early church, in the book of Acts, there's a lot of topics that was widely debated by the early church that they tried to resolve and come to a common ground. Right? We see that they would have debated topics like marriage and remarriage, and that's where Paul adds more information, giving us clarity on marriage and remarriage, and what should a Christian do if the Christian is married to an unbeliever, and the unbelieving spouse wants to leave the believing spouse. He gives all this additional information, right? That was a well-debated topic. Another thing that the early church debated was the debated circumcision, right? Because the Jews said they must be circumcised, and then the Gentile was like, no. So I don't know which man would not have debated that, right? And maybe that's the thing, maybe why if women should be lead pastors, maybe that wasn't debated as much in the early church because women didn't have as much of a voice in that society and in that time and in that culture. Which brings us to the final question. What is the final verdict that we should have? And I'm going to share my perspective, and you're entitled to your perspective. Maybe you have a different point of view. But I believe that the issue is not ability, but it's authority. Because in Timothy, he says a woman should not have authority over a man. That's the final thing. That's what's created in this here. A woman should not have authority over a man. And we know that in the structure of a home, God has placed the man to be the head of the home, the priest of the home, and a woman together with him to serve and to build the family. And because you don't have equal roles and responsibility, doesn't make you less in your in your ability, in your value. You know, sometimes when we hear a man is the head of the home, it makes us think that a man is more important. That doesn't mean he's more important. We started in Proverbs 31 with all the qualities of a queen. This doesn't make a man more important, right? While we might have different roles and responsibilities, it doesn't mean anyone is more or less important than the other. When a man and a woman get married, the two become one flesh. They are equal, but yet different rules and responsibilities. There are things that women can do that men can't do. For example, women can bear a child and men can't do that, right? Biologically, there are different things, and then emotionally and psychologically, there are ways that we differ in responsibilities. And that is the way that God created us. That is how God exists as well, as a Trinity, the Father, Son, and the Holy Spirit, each having different rules and responsibility, but equal in power and authority, which brings us now to the question of authority. If ability isn't the question, because women do have the ability, they have the ability to be lead pastors, then what about authority? And I think that to answer this, it comes down to your perspective of what it means to be a lead pastor. Because for me, being a lead pastor is not about authority, but it's about servanthood, right? I believe in leading true servanthood. I believe in leading true being a servant. And if I ask any man, should a woman serve, in the church? They would say, yes, for sure, right? And the thing is that when we examine the life of Jesus, Jesus never led through authority. He led through servanthood. That was how he led the disciples. That was the legacy that he lived. I didn't come to be served by man, but to serve man. That's what Jesus said. So if our perspective of leadership when it comes to being a pastor, lead pastor of a church, means true servanthood and not authority, then yes, a woman could definitely be a lead pastor. Why is it not authority? Because in the home, a woman should not have authority over a man. And the family construct, a woman should not have authority over a man, because a man is placed as the head of the home. That does not refer to the old time ways or that society where men had dominance over a woman, right? That is not what God speaks about when God speaks about authority. He means that when there's a collaboration, a decision to be made, there's that discussion, and then in the final as the discussion goes by, there's an equal understanding, and the man comes to that place where both the man and the woman has an agreement, but the man, quote unquote, has the authority in what is finally said in that agreement. But at the end of the day, the man has to subject to the authority of Christ. So a man can't come about doing whatever he wants and saying whatever he wants and having, quote unquote, his ways when it's not biblical. He has to subject to the authority of Christ in the home, in the construct of the home. So when I come back now to the authority and leadership is true servanthood. Now, I know what you're saying, but Jesus has authority. I just said Jesus has authority over the man when it comes to the man being the head of the home. Jesus is the head of the church, right? And he's also the head of the man when it comes to the family construct. Jesus, yes, Jesus has all power and all authority. But if you examine scripture, you will see Jesus never exercised authority over man either. Jesus never exercised authority over man. Jesus exercised authority over demons and over sickness, never over man. He never exercised authority over his disciples or over the crowds or over the Pharisees or anyone. He taught, he served, he demonstrated who he was, but he never exerted authority. He didn't say, bow down and worship me, I am king. He didn't use his authority in that way, but he led through servanthood. So if that's your perspective of leadership, then yes, a woman can be a pastor. And of course, it comes back to having all the qualities as well listed in 1 Timothy chapter 3 of what it means to be a pastor, having those qualities as well for a woman. And it comes down to the husband and wife having that agreement where the husband is in support of the wife in this pastoral world. Likewise, it's the same thing with a man and a woman. A man must have the support of a wife in that stepping out into a pastoral role. So world and role, same thing, right? So yes, a woman can be a pastor. She can lead a church. If you have your own preference, that's your choice. You have the choice. If you don't want to be under a woman pastor, that's your choice. But it doesn't mean that you should bash them. It doesn't mean that you should use scripture out of context to try to say that women should not have a voice. Biblically, from Old Testament to New Testament, it is congruent. Women do have a voice, and I do believe that women can lead. They definitely can lead the church. And I do believe that when it comes to leading, it must be done through the way that Jesus led. I do believe men have it wrong when they in their perspective of what it means to be leaders. They just see authority. Jesus never saw authority; he saw servant. And so, to my fellow women and to the men that are viewing that have this question in the back of their mind, who have exerted wrongful quote unquote authority over women in terms of this debated topic, my final perspective on this, my final answer is that yes, women can be leaders of the church. They can be pastors. They can be the senior pastor. There is biblical support for it throughout the Old and New Testament. Yes, there are scriptures that would say otherwise, but it's how we examine those scriptures and interpret it. And like I said, yes, a woman should not have authority over a man. I agree with 1 Timothy chapter 2. That is biblical. That is congruent throughout scripture. But leadership is not about authority. It's about servanthood. So that brings us to the end of our series, of our wisdom series. We're going to continue with our Bible study every Monday at 7 p.m. We'll be studying a different book of the Bible, and I'll let you know what that book is so you can begin reading. If you didn't finish reading Proverbs, all 31 chapters, do that before next week, Monday, when we start our new book of the Bible and our new series. And I do hope that you were enlightened. If you have questions, I know it's a debatable topic. Maybe you do have questions. You can leave it in the comments here on YouTube, or you can WhatsApp me personally and I will respond and clarify. Maybe there's something in scripture that I missed. Hey, feel free to send me it. Let's examine it together. And let's examine God's word and see what it really says. We will, at the end of the day, God's word is that final instruction that guides our life, and we got to live by his word, and that word has to be that which precedes any thoughts of man, any ideas of man, any social concepts, any cultural concepts. God's word has quote unquote authority over all of that. And based on God's word, I can conclude from our study tonight that yeah, women can be pastors. So take care, and next week, Monday, will be our next session at 7 p.m.